Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am joined currently by Kevin McCluskey, and we will be joined by Lawrence Conley. Today is deadline day when it comes to the transfer window. Kevin McCluskey, we will be talking all about that. We'll be talking about the aftermath of the Rangers game, the result, but also it's the first time I've been on since that, and obviously there's been a huge amount of coverage, and quite rightly so, on the scenes that have resulted in video footage being circulated amongst all over the internet, actually, in relation to some of the behaviour of some of the Rangers fans, both outside and inside the stadium. And we're going to have a wee chat about that as well. And when Lawrence is in, we can talk about the ins and outs at Celtic Park. And we'll also talk, Kevin, about us being drawn with our old friends, or is it foes, Ferencváros, because you are pretty well placed to talk all about that. So, top of the show, explain to us where you are and how you've got such a good knowledge of one of Celtic's opponents in the Europa League group stages.
Yeah, so I'm actually based out in Budapest. Been here for the last 4 years now, yeah. So, yeah, get to quite a few of the Ferencváros games. Most of them are actually shown live on the TV as well. So I've watched quite a lot of them over the last few years, especially the European games. And they've had a couple of good runs in recent years through the Europa League, and then obviously last season into the Champions League. So yeah, a good side, one that will give us another tough game, just like they did last year.
Yeah, we spoke to you in the lead up to that, and you gave us a really good insight, so much so that I think you were the Hungarian football correspondent for every other channel thereafter, and that's fair enough because you've got that insight. It would be fantastic, obviously, to speak to you again, maybe even on the day when we're covering the game. It's a big fixture. We'll also talk about how that fixture's been changed and rescheduled, and how that's a wee bit, really, when you're looking at it, not certainly with the fans' best wishes at heart, but when is it ever so? So a couple of points coming in on the comment section if you are watching on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch. Thanks for getting involved. A Celtic State of Mind is streaming on all of these different services and platforms, and if any others become available, we will join them as well, getting the word out. This is a Celtic State of Mind. We are talking the biggest day of the season so far being transfer deadline day. Who we're going to bring in, it's pretty clear who is going to go out. And we're going to have to look at how we've actually done in this window and how we've got into a situation, Kevin, as well, where we're losing players and people are saying, all right, that's not a bad fee for Edouard and it's good to get a couple of million quid for Christie, but we really need to look at how we got into that position. And I know that you've got player power and contract talks have been ongoing with the likes of Ryan Christie, but in terms of assets and the amount of money that we have lost just in the value of assets as well as bad signings over the last year, it leaves a bit of a bad taste in the mouth when you're losing Edouard potentially for 14-15 million pound plus add-ons. And Christie, I mean, some of the transfer fees that I've been reading about are between 1 to 2.5 million quid. This is a player, and don't scoff at me in the back for anybody before I say this, that, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, you'd have been talking about him in the same kind of breath as Chris Hire. You would have been looking at 10 plus for Ryan Christie. Now, I'm not being revisionist, and I'm not just saying it because he's had a good spell in the first team under Ange. That was the kind of figures, and I'll tell you the story about the Inverness Cali official I spoke to around about that time, because obviously they've got a sell on as well on the player. But how disappointed are you there, Kevin? We kind of expected to lose these two guys. I'm more disappointed in the deals that Celtic are getting for the two of them.
Yeah, I think we've all expected that those two would be the two that would leave in this window. So it's probably not a surprise that they are going, but the fees that we're getting it's not reflective of the value of the players. Couple of seasons, start of last season, had we let Edouard go, you could have been looking at 20-25 million for him, which would be good money if we were willing to reinvest that back in the squad. Mm-hmm. Same with Christie, again, like you say, he'd be a £10 million player at the start of last season. but we've let them both dwindle their contracts down. We've let them both become unhappy. Performances have dropped, values dropped. So now we're paying the price for that.
Yeah, we certainly are. And I mean, we could probably dedicate a whole show, and we will be talking transfers tomorrow with Colin Watt when he's back in on the Wednesday Bulletin. We could dedicate a whole show to the kind of mismanagement. I mean, Celtic for a long time were given a lot of kind of plaudits, and rightly so, for the way that they were able to bring in a player, Kevin, develop them, put them on a platform in the Champions League, and then sell that player. You know, Van Dijk being a tremendous example of it. Victor Wanyama. We did it with a number of players, and even, you know, more recently, Moussa Dembele. You bring him in for £500,000, you sell him for 20, and we were able to do that with so many players. But two guys who I think were big assets. In fact, you could probably say three of them, because Chris Sire was in that bracket. Three big assets that are leaving or have left Celtic this season. You know, had we managed it better, we could have had tens of millions of pounds more. And that's my biggest frustration. They're leaving the building. We wish them the best. We'll talk about them individually, but we also have to look at who's coming in and if we're happy with that as well. But this is your first opportunity on A Celtic State of Mind to have a chat about the Rangers game. It's the first derby. Massive challenge. I think when we came up against AZ Alkmaar, we were calling it the biggest game of the season. You know, after obviously Midtjylland, where we got bounced out, we managed to get through the tie. The momentum was still high, even though we got beat away from home in Europe. We went into this game against Rangers, I'm not going to say fully confidence, but there certainly was a spring in the step, Kevin. There's a momentum, there's a positivity. We're either buying into Ange Postecoglou or we've bought into Ange Postecoglou, and then Sunday happens. So talk me through your kind of view on the game and what went wrong.
I've been thinking a lot about the game, as most of us have since then. And I still can't actually decide how I feel about it and how it went. I felt for the first half, we were at least equal with Rangers. Obviously, Edouard had that chance that he should have scored. If he gets that totally changes the game. We're in the ascendancy. And we'd probably go on and win, because I don't think Rangers were threatening much at that point. Then, the second half, we just fell out of it. We didn't seem to have a plan B when Rangers stepped up a little bit. The goal that we lost is the same goal we've lost for the last 18 months. Can't defend the set piece, which is it's criminal at our level. And obviously, you lose the game. You don't want to lose any game, especially not one of your biggest rivals. But I'm not overly disheartened, despite all the negatives that I've probably just come up with there for it. Because last season, that team would have capitulated, I think, against Rangers. We went in at the races against them for the majority of the games we played last season. At least this time, I felt for a period we were at least level. So there's definitely positives to take. But then on the other hand, I look back 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that's a game we would win comfortably. So I think that's the thing that hits me most, is how far we've fallen. That we're actually looking at a defeat and thinking it wasn't that bad after all. But it is, because you can't afford to lose these games.
No. See the big thing, Kevin, and I've got to welcome Lawrence Conley into the discussion. Lawrence, how are you, sir?
As well I am, sir. How are the pair of the both of yous?
Yeah, you're looking well. I watch these dial-ins on the likes of Sky Sports, and people are strategically placing their artwork behind them. David James has always got a different bit of artwork, or when Pat Nevin's on, it's always a copy of his book, front-facing. Lawrence, I hope there's nothing scribbled on that whiteboard that's going to get me into trouble, because my eyesight's so bad. What does it say? We're magic. All right, that's fine.
It's just graffiti on the wall.
Right. The whiteboard. What? I can't even read that up the cell. So that's fine. It's nice and clean. I thought it was some kind of formula on how to make it work in the transfer market for Celtic today. There doesn't seem to be a formula. There are going to be players coming in, players leaving, Lawrence. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, and also talking about our Hungarian opposition, who we'll be facing next month, we're having a wee overview of the Rangers game. It's the first time I've been back on since the match day stuff on Sunday. I've not had a time to really discuss the aftermath. Yeah, a lot of it happened before the game, but the aftermath was that, There were videos circulating online. Police Scotland have made a statement. Rangers have made a statement. I think the big issue for me with this, and any kind of offensive behaviour, language, abuse has to be called out first and foremost. So on that note, we had an incident last week where, ACSOM was targeted and one of our contributors was targeted vehemently and incessantly, which is completely unacceptable. And they're targeted from, the same kind of group of people who obviously find a reason to target someone within our podcast or because they've got a Celtic association, and they will not let it go. And that kind of targeting, the kind of abuse that people are getting, the personal kind of abuse is offensive at the best of times. And we've seen it online, we've seen it on the social media channels, and what we've now seen is on a wider scale, Lawrence, the racist element. So they're targeting, there's anti-Irish chants that we've heard. We've seen the abuse of Hugo over the last couple of weeks, and indeed at the game on Sunday. Lawrence Conley, you are someone who has faced this throughout your life. What will be done? I mean, we know what should be done. What do you think will be done? I mean, coming out and making a statement's all fair and well. Coming out with a campaign, that's fine as well. But we need action. We need to stamp this out as society as well as out of football.
Well, listen, it's definitely a society problem, but, I think the statement's all about, the footage that emerged at the weekend. Well, is that the near 50,000 in Ibrox singing racist songs for almost 90 minutes? Or are they talking about a 30-second clip of about 30 or 40 guys singing it? What's worse here? Because I think that most of the condemnation is about guys singing at Argyle Street. So it's kind of okay if you've got 50-odd thousand. We won't condemn that. Listen, the only way I see it is, I think Tony Haggerty's a big advocate of deducting points to get out of football stadiums. And, some people say one side's as bad as the other. Well, there was no Celtic fans there. you cannot argue Sunday was anything other than Rangers fans saying that. So what will be done? We've had a bit of lip service. How quickly will the police investigate? I don't know, but you would think that it's not going to be too hard to identify it. Mm-hmm. Rangers have said, if there's any season tickets identified, so I don't know if they're going to supply stadium CCTV. I'm pretty sure there was no Celtic fans. They'll know who they sold all the tickets to. They'll know who's sitting in the seats.
Yep.
How far do they really want to take it? Or do they want to just say, we won't deal with near 50,000, but we'll just deal with 30 or 40 that's singing in Argyle Street. Mostly it's just lip service, to be honest. And you've seen it kind of on social media, call it out, weren't invited on by BBC Scotland to discuss it. Listen, it's an anti-Irish problem. Let's not discuss it with people that are representing the Irish community. Let's discuss it with people that don't represent the Irish community. It's a strange way to deal with things. But I think, other than deducting points, what's really going to stop it at football?
No, I think it's a good point, Lawrence, because as you say, the issue exists in society. And it comes to the fore often because we are a football show and we're watching football games. It comes to the fore in terms of our points of discussion when we experience it at the football. So it's a society issue which often comes to the fore when it's within a stadium, filled to the rafters, being screened worldwide, and it happens there. And I think the point in terms of the football side of it is very, very well made, that if you start hammering the club in terms of points deductions, because even fines sometimes, we've seen clubs getting fined and they pay the fine, they move on, it happens again. And I just think if you actually deduct points, that's where you can really make a huge change. And it just occurred to me before we speak about transfers as well, Lawrence, was that why you were late? Because you were drawing that graffiti up on your whiteboard, up the Celts and all that? Because if so, that's fine. That's worthwhile. No, I was able to introduce Kevin.
I had a cyber attack and I had to reset all my security. So,
dear me.
And because I've got 3 steps, it's 3 layers of security, it takes a while to reset everything. So, so that's why I was late. But listen, if they don't see, as long as it's allowed in football, that's going to be like a signal that it's allowed in society. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
We touched on it actually last week when I said, well, you know, I think the Quality Act was 68 or something that came in, but Rangers were allowed to operate a discriminatory signing policy for years and years after, with no consequences on them. So they're allowed to openly break the law in terms of discrimination in who they signed. Well, what does that say to their followers? Listen, it's okay to discriminate against the guys. We do it. You know, football's mostly tribal. People identify with the clubs they follow. Well, if it's okay for them, if it's okay for the club, that means it's okay for them, doesn't it? And I think, you know, as long as we say it's okay to happen in football stadiums, nothing really happens. Well, why would people change?
It will continue unless it's tackled at the very highest level, Lawrence, without a doubt. And although we've not had an opportunity to speak about it until today, it's not something that we will dedicate the entire show to today, but obviously we will be looking at how that develops, and we'll talk about it as it goes on as well, because it affects a hell of a lot of our viewers. And you're tuning in from all over the place. We're getting a lot of Australians tuning in. We've got a lot of that at the game on Sunday, and lots of Japanese followers as well. So welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. We're talking transfer deadline day. This is one of these things that's been given the Hollywood box office treatment, Kevin McCluskey. You know, it's one of these things that the broadcasters love it. They've got the ticker tape. They're going to watch it right down to the wire. Some of the fees that you see down south are sickening. Never mind Watermount, for me, mouth-watering. They're sickening, some of the fees that you see. But there's a couple of things we need to talk about. And before we move into things like the Ryan Christie deal, the Eddie deal, and who's coming in the door, I was asking Lawrence, just before you came in there, I was asking Kevin all about how underwhelming it is where you've got a player like Eddie. So let's start with Eddie and what he's done at the club. 23 years of age, not yet a full French internationalist. Comes in for £9 million from PSG, who, of course, have got a 40% sell-on clause for the profit of any sell-on fee. And he's gone off the boil. That's what's happened. He's gone off the boil last season. There were signs, I've got to say, Lawrence, but then Sunday comes along and he has another, poor performance, I would suggest. He looks to be leaving the club for between 14 to 15 million quid. That's the upfront fee. It might rise to about 18.5. He's going to Crystal Palace. What's your thoughts on that deal? And also on the transfer fee, the makeup of that deal? I know, obviously, the Christie and the Eddie deals are coming down to the length of the contract left at the club. But it is disappointing when a player like that leaves. I know it's good money, don't get me wrong, but I just think that, we've not really managed that situation that well, have we?
Well, I suppose it goes back to how we managed last season's transfer window. We changed our model, or the board changed their model in pursuit of winning the 10, didn't they? Players like Eddie, who would have been sold, and at one point we were talking 40 million for this player. He's surely Scottish football's first 40 million player. Were kept on, same way Ayer was kept on. We changed something that had worked for us in pursuit of winning the 10, so we can't sell these players, and it didn't work. We took that gamble of changing a transfer or a way of dealing with players' contracts and moving them on and turning the profit. And the gamble of winning the 10, it didn't work for us. He's got a year left in his contract. There's no doubt his form's dipped, whether that's down purely to application or mindset. He just doesn't want to be here. Who knows? Or he literally isn't. He just lost form. I think it's decent money for a player. 10 months left in his contract? If that, 9 months on his contract. So, he get another 4 months he could speak to people for free. We've still got a decent sell-on it. We've brought in over 50 million this year in transfer fees. All in all, I think he had to go. You could see that it wasn't working with him. And said, that was one of the mistakes on Sunday, playing him through in the middle in Postecoglou. Mm-hmm. But probably one of the big misses for Sunday's Greg Taylor. The team was, as much as as good as Juranovic looked, I don't think the team was entirely comfortable with a right-footed guy playing left back and just the way he could play the left wingers and or not play them in. Maybe that's why Postecoglou didn't look that good on the left in the same way with Christie. But all in all, I'm happy he's moved out. Yeah, I'd expected us to get at least double that for him last season. But where we are, the market's fairly depressed. There's not been as much movement as you'd have thought. And he's off for him with a short contract. It's how much could we really have pushed it? But to get less than Christopher Ayer for him is a bit disappointing. You know, strikers are normally at a premium.
Yeah, I mean, I said time and time again that Edouard, I would have loved, Kevin McCluskey, I would have loved to have seen Eddie and Dembele playing for a period of time at Celtic. That was the thing that I thought would have been a great partnership. And then I thought to myself, you know, any other club that's looking to get that partnership could probably do it for a decent enough fee. He's gone to Crystal Palace. How do you think he's going to do at that level, Kevin? I mean, has he shown you enough? And I know that he's performed well for the French under-21 team. Has he shown enough to say that he's going to go down there and he's going to use Crystal Palace to step up another level, or is this his level?
I think it's a strange one in a way, Crystal Palace, for him, because he's going to have to go down there and be the main man, the main striker in a side that's probably going to battle against relegation. As good as he is, and as highly as I rate him, I don't think it's the right fit for him. I don't think it's the right team. So I think he could go down there and struggle. He would be better suited maybe at an Everton, someone like that that's kind of mid-table, pushing for Europe, plays an attacking style of football, that's got other good players that could play around him. But it'll be interesting to see how he does down at Palace, and how he kind of rises to the challenge of having to be the main man in a relegation-threatening team.
Yeah, I look at some of the players that have gone down from Scottish football, and you look and you think, well, you know what, they're going to get another move, so they're going to do the Andy Robertson thing, aren't they? And the players that I'm thinking about are the likes of Kieran Tierney. I think he's going to leave Arsenal. He's going to take a step up. I'm not saying it's happening right now, but I think it is going to happen. And we spoke about that when he left Celtic, actually. You know, is this it for Kieran Tierney? Is this him now getting to that level, that peak level that Kieran Tierney can get to? And the discussion we had is, no, he can go bigger, he can go higher than that. I also get the feeling that when Chris Ayer goes to Brentford, no disrespect to the club, because I know they've got a really impressive outfit down there, I do think that there's potential there for Chris Ayer to improve and get another move, you know, and then we'll be looking at the transfer fee and thinking, wow. John McGinn's another example, going down to Villa. If they were to sell him now, he would certainly be making a step up, and it would be for an incredible amount. What's your thoughts, Lawrence, on Eddie and what the future holds for him? Sometimes you forget that he is only 23 years of age. I mean, they're getting a player down at Crystal Palace who still has bags of potential, who could still develop.
Listen, if it was the Eddie of 2 years ago, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, because he was on such an upward trajectory. The problem is his forms kind of fell off, and a lot of that, I think, is to do with application. Ayer was always trying, you know, Tierney was always giving their all. I think maybe Eddie, and it showed the last few games, it's not that easy to switch it on and off. You know, once you've kind of let it go down or dropped your standards, try to get them back not as easy as maybe you thought it was going to be. So I think he'll do well for Palace. Could he have got a better team? Well, who else was in for him? Bordeaux. You know, how many bids? I think a few teams have looked at it and went, you know what, that boy could have been cracking. But last 2 seasons, his application in games has been somewhat questionable, I would say. And maybe they just don't fancy that. Maybe they're saying that's something we don't need to really, you know, if things start going against him here, is that way to do it is. So maybe they don't want to bring it into camp. I think he'll score goals down there. And I think he will do better in Palace. But I think it's going to, you know, he's got a lot of hard work ahead of him to get his form back.
He certainly does. Like you say, you can't stop and start form. You know, it's about momentum. It's about confidence, particularly with a striker. I'd love to see him doing well. I've got to say, I would love to see him doing well now that he's, you know, almost definitely out the building. We'll be talking about Christie. We'll then be summing up what we feel about the window. Sean F comes in on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, Sean. We needed to add more anyway, even with Christie and Edouard. You know, by the way, even if they'd stayed, we had to add more, and I agree with that. You know, there were positions on that park, and it feels now that we're just replacing them. So I get Sean's point here. And then it looks as though perhaps there's going to be a flurry near the end of today, before the window shuts at midnight, and a couple of loan deals will come in. And again, I know it's difficult. It's very difficult to manage a transfer window, but the key is always, Kevin, to come out of it stronger than you went in. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to have all that money sitting in the bank, but unless we're going to reinvest it and make sure that we've got that centre-half that we're crying out for, and we've got the cover on the left, and we've got another striker in the door. It looks as though some of the positions will be filled, however, but it can be frustrating if you look at the ins and outs and we appear to be weaker. Do you think that is going to be the case, even if we bring in Giacomakis and Jota from Benfica as well? I mean, that's the left-hand side, that's the forward. You could almost say like for like, Christie and Edouard, but we still don't have that centre-half that we're crying out for.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that point, that what we seem to be doing just now is just moving one out, bringing one in. It's like for like signings. I haven't seen enough of Jota or Giacomakis to know if they're going to be better players than Christie or Edouard. So are we maybe even lessening the quality of the squad by bringing these two in? So it's a hard one, and I just I really want to say that we're going to be stronger coming into the window, but heart and hand on hand, I don't think we are. I think we're going to come out a weaker side than we went in, which I don't blame Ange for at all in any way, because he's had a massive job in this rebuild over the summer. He's basically having to rebuild an entire team. So anything that he's been able to do that will improve us, it's going to be small improvements. But I think overall key areas we're still lacking in players. As you say, centre half, we need that commanding centre half, the boy that stops the Rangers goal. We need him, the boy that goes and wins that ball in the air. We need, for me, still someone in the centre of the park. McGregor's excellent, probably my favourite player at the club at the moment. I think he just dominates the midfield, but he needs someone alongside him. It might be McCarthy, but with his injury worries, can you trust him to last the full season? So we need a presence there as well. Probably the front three, you'd be more happy with now if we're bringing Jota in, Kyogo through the middle, Forrest and Abada on the right. That's fairly strong. But yeah, I do feel that there's key areas that we're still going to be lacking in, and it's the areas that we've been lacking in for 2 or 3 years. Places we've known we've needed strengthening and just haven't done it.
No, that is the biggest frustration. It's a number of transfer windows, and if you come out just that little bit weaker over a period of time, then all you need to do is look at the last 5 or 6 seasons and the amount of players that have left the club who weakened the club and were never really replaced properly. I mean, Tierney's a classic example, Stuart Armstrong. You ask yourself, have these players been replaced? And, if they have been, they've been replaced with lesser quality. And that's the frustration, because over a period of time, your competitors catch up with you and overtake you. Now, the Urban Coolshay, we need backup or better in 3 key areas of the pitch. It will have to be loans on big money at this stage. We cannot hand Champions League football to the other Glasgow club. Now, we've spoken time and time again on the podcast, Lawrence Connolly, about the short-termism of bringing in loan deals, but it looks as though, if anything beyond the 2 players that I've mentioned are to come in, then we're probably looking at loan deals. We need a centre-half. There's this big thing like, Julien's coming back and that's going to be a magic wand. We were critical of Julien when he was playing as well. I still think we're short at centre-half.
Julian's, he's been out a long time, injury. How long is it really going to take him to get up to speed? And will he come back from injury? What kind of players? If we're critical of him before, he's surely not going to come back a better player. I said it could be loans. I think Mustafi that is free over in Germany, centre-half that used to play for Everton. There's a few free agent centre-halves that could possibly look at as well. But we definitely need a centre-half in. Taylor been out. We need a left back, even more so. We thought we needed cover before. Taylor gets injured, unbalances the team, I think, and was a big reason why we didn't win on Sunday. There doesn't seem to be any moves other than the boy Scales, and I've not really seen much League of Ireland football, and I don't know what kind of standard he is. But I was hoping that we're going to bring in someone better than Taylor, or at least as good as to challenge him for that position. Left wing, if it's one out, one in, well, we needed more cover. That's not more cover. That's the same. And the boy, the forward, it's one good season he's had. It's kind of what's it going to be like? Can he replicate that good season? Can he not? Eddie had to go, but surely there was. We'll need the anyway, because if Griff's gone as well to Dundee, that's 2 out, 1 in. It's you're struggling, I think, for cover all over the park. Centre mid, Callum showed up Sunday. Did anyone else in the midfield? And it could be McCarthy. Maybe he'll change that, but he's got injury problems. We definitely need cover. Robertson's going out on loan, so it's not going to be him. There's a number of positions that need addressed, and surely the club have the money. I mean, over 50 million money brought in. We've not exactly splashed the cash, have we? Yeah, we're not.
No, we haven't. We definitely not. And you could go further back with Frimpong, and it's about, you're selling a player for £11.5 million. In his case, you're bringing in a loanee. When the loanee returns to his parent club, you're bringing in Tony Ralston, who, by the way, I think has played particularly well. I thought he played really well against Rangers as well. But it's about losing a player and not sufficiently replacing them. So if you take the Edouard scenario, for example, we brought him in at £9 million, and I think at that point, that was a good bit of forward planning, because at that time, Dembele was still at the club. Now, I don't think Edouard was a direct like-for-like replacement, because they're two very different players, the way that they play. But at least we had the quality there prior to Dembele leaving. And I think what's happening is we're losing Edouard, and I'm not writing off any of the new guys coming in, Liam Scales included. But Giacomakis, as Lawrence says here, Kevin, he's had a great season in a club. The club that he was playing for has been relegated, and I know quite a few of his goals were from the penalty spot. But it's a different calibre of player than Odsonne Edouard coming in from PSG, and when you first seen his performances as a loan player, you realised this guy's the real deal. You knew that he was going to cost a hell of a lot of money, and indeed, he is the record signing to this day as a Celtic player. That's the record amount of money we've shelled out on one single player, and it'll probably take a long time before we exceed that. So I'm a wee bit concerned, and I'm also concerned that 2 or 3 loan deals coming in, a flurry of loan deals at the kind of last couple of hours of the transfer window. And only then can we really look at it, and we will be analysing the entire window tomorrow. I've had a couple of people in the comment section saying that my picture is blurry, so apologies if that's the case, or maybe not. Maybe it's better blurry. I don't know. If it's out of focus, it might be actually better for your experience. But if we do drop out, Lawrence and Kevin can keep the show running whilst I get it sorted out. It's those gremlins that Lawrence said at the beginning of the show, creeping into the studio. You've mentioned Lee Griffiths. Now, this may well be the last show for some time that we have to speak about Lee Griffiths, because he has been the subject of a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, and a lot of drama since the Celtic State of Mind set up the Bulletin just over a year ago. The story is, the news breaking is that Dundee are going to take a chance on him as a loan player. He knows the manager from his time at Livingston. 100%, this is the right deal, Kevin, isn't it? Let's get Lee Griffiths out and playing elsewhere.
I think so. I think it's the best thing for him, and it's the best thing for Celtic. He's had far too many chances, and he hasn't taken them in the last couple of years. His career's suffered. His mental health has suffered over the last couple of years. And I think the best thing for him is to just get a fresh start somewhere else, somewhere where he's going to feel at home again, feel loved, get games. And I hope it's a success for him, because an on-form Lee Griffiths is a joy to watch going forward. He's a top striker. So I hope it really works for him. And then it would work for Scotland as well, which would be a nice knock-on as well, that the Scottish national team could get an on-form striker as well, which would be a good boost. But I want to go back as well, just on the point that you were making about Edouard, to say that I think you're totally right. He was probably the last signing that Celtic made when we actually showed a bit of forward planning.
Yeah.
We haven't done it since then. And we brought him in, as you say, on loan. He had a season to bed in for us to get to know him. No pressure on him at all to perform. He did perform. He rose to the occasion. We brought him in. And we had a succession plan for him to become the number one striker. And we've never done it for anyone else in any other position since then. Right back probably been the number one position where you think we should have, because Lustig's been away for about 2-3 seasons now, and it's just been a succession of loan signings that's come in to take that position. So, yeah, like I say, yeah, I totally get that point with Edouard being the last, but actual good proactive transfer management that Celtic's done.
You're right. It's almost as if we get to a critical point. I mean, you think of the situation with the goalies, you get to a critical point, and when your first pick is injured, or the form starts waning, or it's time for them to leave the club, it's critical. We need to bring somebody in. We never have that player at the club, and sometimes in the point of Ralston, yeah.
Yeah,
in the point of Ralston, he's there, and we don't utilise him.
Exactly, and for most of the positions in the team, we've probably known that player X is leaving in a year's time, and we haven't done anything to bring the next boy through. And if it was to be Ralston at right back, then he should have been in the team 2 seasons ago. He should have been getting buried into the team anyway, a couple of years ago, to make sure he was actually ready for the step up when it came. But we just don't seem to do it, which is appalling for a team of our size.
No, you're right. And I think that there was an element of that period of time. I'll throw this one over to you, Lawrence, where, the project, people say a project signing someone you bring in for 2.5 and you sell for 10. That's fine, but a project signing always is also someone who you're bringing in and they're not what you would say first team ready, but you're developing them potentially for 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 18 months, so that then you've got that succession planning. I mean, time and time again, we brought in players and we thought, they could be a successor to Scott Brown. Scott Brown left and we still didn't have the successor. That was the bad planning that we've had for a number of years at Celtic.
Yeah, but listen, a project's anyone that you think you can bring in and improve, isn't it? And get better performances out of them. Chris Ayer was one. He came in. Leo Held was one, but he's come in and gone rather quickly, hasn't he? He didn't see the way at the first team. You've touched on it with Brown. Classy looked as if he was going to be a player. He actually had a decent game at Tynecastle, then get injured, and kind of never heard of again. But our success rate's pretty low because we have brought players in. You've touched on it with Brown. A number of guys were going to be, the successor to Brown, but for whatever reason, they don't get minutes in the first team. We never really see them, or that the ones that do get minutes just haven't been good enough. There's been other players brought in. You could put Shred into this list that managers don't know anything about. You know that. So who knows who's signing them at a time with loads of wingers. So it's it appears a bit haphazard at times. Surely you're going, right, we need at least 2 players for every position. What's the players' contracts? Can we get this up and let's get some planning going? Right, who's in the youths? Who are we bringing through that could possibly replace one of those 2? I don't know. It doesn't sound complicated, but we managed to kind of. It's almost as if we don't have a plan, isn't it? Certainly. It's
that strategy. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's that strategy.
Winger, and the manager's going, we don't need wingers. I need, maybe another right back, but not wingers. It's just bizarre, isn't it? It just seems to be off the cuff a lot of the time.
It has been. Yeah, it has been. And I think that, in many ways, it's a complacency of saying, well, for a number of years, if we had a problematic position, we can go and spend a few £1 million and solve it. And a lot of those few £1 million was money down the drain. We see it again. We're talking about a centre half. I'm going to get a few points in before we talk about the curious case of Jack Hendry. So Stevie Boy comes in on YouTube. Thanks for getting involved, Stevie. Welcome to the show. I'm sorry we're talking about Eddie here, I think, but his lazy play will get found out. Hope he has a nightmare, him and Encham. Well, he gave up trying. I think Encham certainly had checked out big time, to the point where the club ripped up his contract, And when a club does that and it's costing you money, you know that there's an issue. And you wonder, with all that talent, with all that technical ability, and I mean Encham and Edouard, you do wonder sometimes where they're going to take it, what level they're going to take it to. Encham had a look at Marseille, or they had a look at him, and he was sent back to Celtic. So a lot of these players have got kind of highfalutin ideas of their ability. But if the application's not there, all it takes is 1 or 2 spells at clubs, and then they will have a reputation, and you will often find that they will eventually find their level. Daniel Mack comes in once again. Ayer off to a good start at Brentford. I honestly think that Chris Ayer will get another big move. I think that I'm not going to call Brentford a stepping stone. I'm not going to be disrespectful, but I think that that's a player. And I know his deficiencies, and I know Celtic fans, in terms of his defending and his heading, had concerns about him. But I think he's a player that is continuing to develop, and we will see a big move. There was talk about AC Milan. I mean, they confirmed it themselves, Kevin. AC Milan were interested in this player. He was a player of interest. He could make another step up from Brentford. What do you think?
Absolutely. There's a real player in Ayer. I don't think he's a centre-half. He's got too many issues there, certainly with dealing with high balls, which is strange for someone at his height. But I think there's a quality centre midfielder in him. He's good on the ball. He can drive forward. Likes to take the team forward from the deep positions. So I definitely think he's got a future, big future, and he'll move on from Brentford, definitely. And I don't think it's actually doing them a disservice to say they're a stepping stone club, because I think they know what they're getting into with him. He's a player they've signed for about 15 million, probably with the view that they could sell him on for 25 in a couple of years' time or more. If he impresses in the Premiership, his value will just skyrocket.
It will be interesting, actually, or maybe not. The word interesting might not be the right one. To look at Kieran Tierney, Chris Ayer, Odsonne Edouard, and Ryan Christie's next moves, and then start adding up the deficit. Red Scotland comes in. Jota will be a baller. It certainly looks the part. Lee Griffiths has had his jotters. He's off to Dundee. Well, I suggested that he should go to New York with Ronnie Dyler. Lawrence, that's where he played his best football of his career, and he's ended up at Dundee, so he obviously didn't take my advice. Do you think he'll be a success at Dundee?
Relatively, yeah. I mean, Dundee's not going to have anyone of his finishing ability, are they? So he's going to be the main striker. He likes being the main striker. What's success for Lee Griffiths these days? I think it's just getting back and getting minutes in the football field and staying off the front pages would probably be success for him.
Yeah.
I've no doubt he'll get minutes. I'm not too sure he'll stay off the front pages.
That's always going to be that concern. And then it gets to the point, he's a 30-year-old footballer, and already, for me, he's on that trajectory. He's on that downward trajectory. He's leaving a club like Celtic to join Dundee again. No disrespect, I've got pals who support Dundee. I wouldn't disrespect them, but he's on that trajectory that we have spoken about when talking about the likes of Anthony Stokes, for example. And it's always, for me, I love to see people fulfilling their potential. I take no joy, even in Cham, I take no joy in any player leaving Celtic and not doing well. I'm very much like the club moves on. The club's bigger than the players, and that's absolutely fine. There's a couple of others I want to talk about, though. And the first one is Jack Hendry. I mean, we spoke on a pretty early pre-season pod about the comings and the goings. It would be interesting, Kevin, this week, maybe if Colin and I revisit what we said was going to happen or what should happen. But one of the players we spoke long and hard about was Jack Hendry. And we were talking about the incoming manager, who at that time we didn't know who it was going to be. We thought it was going to be Eddie Howe. There would be a clutch of players that they could maybe revitalise and resurrect. And we've seen it so often in the past, when Brendan Rodgers came in, he resurrected a player. When Martin O'Neill came in, he resurrected certain players. And Ange Postecoglou's done that, no doubt, absolutely no doubt. But we spoke about maybe guys that we had written off and we expected to leave, and for them to come back and do a Ryan Christie. They've been out there and done so well on loan, and they come back in and they really contribute. And we felt perhaps that Jack Hendry was one of those guys, and we're obviously still needing a centre-half. There's a huge section of Celtic support on this show who said no chance. He's a bomb scare, and they were watching him for Scotland at the Euros, and they maintained that he wasn't Celtic class. Well, he went to Ostend, who had a buyout kind of option on the deal, and it was for in the region of 1.75 million. So off he pops, and I don't think we lose any money on the player. But there's a news story breaking this morning that he is the subject of a £10 million bid from Club Brugge already in the matter of months. And we're talking about protecting your assets and a mismanagement of recruitment and transfers, Kevin. If that was to go through, that really is a slap in the face. And I know that Celtic did the deal, if you like, in terms of the sell-on at the beginning of the term when he went to Ostend. I know that. But surely he's still your player. surely you end the loan deal, you bring him back, because at that time there was a few English clubs interested, and apparently they're going to enter the bidding as well. I mean, how gutted would you be if, we wake up tomorrow and Hendry signed for somebody for 10 or 12 million quid?
Very, very gutted, I think, because I would probably be one of the group of Celtic fans who, during the summer, or certainly at the start of the summer, would have been just happy to get rid of Jack Hendry, because looking at his time with us, he underperformed massively, didn't quite manage to step up to fill the jersey. But you say he's gone out to Belgium. Was he not Player of the Year for Ostend?
Yeah.
He had a decent season over there. We already knew there was interest from English Premiership clubs in him. So it makes a lot of sense that we should have brought him back into the fold here. Let the new man, give him a month, 2 months to kind of run his eye over him, see if he's good enough to make the step up. If not, we'd probably sell him around about now at the end of the transfer window, and we'd still make our money back. I don't think there was actually any harm in us keeping him and just seeing how he progressed. Because he's obviously made progress over there.
Yeah.
Coming back a more confident player. So it'll be a hard one to take. And it's another one that you say, we've probably seen it all coming before, that this kind of move could happen and we're going to get stung. I know.
And, the irony is, I'm saying we need a centre-half. And there he is. There's a £10 million centre-half right there. Snick67 on Twitch. Welcome on Twitch. To be honest, since we haven't really made a lot in it, I don't see us spending £9 million again anytime soon. A couple of things I'd say on that. I think that the fact that we went out and got him showed you the kind of influence that Brendan Rodgers had at that time, didn't it? I mean, he went to the board and he convinced them to break the club's transfer record, which had stood for a long time, best part of 20 years, since we brought in Chris Sutton for £6 million. And they did it. They bowed down to his demands at that time. They brought him in. But I tend to agree with that, Lawrence. A club like Celtic, we have brought in expensive players. Since then, we brought in Julien for £7 million, which was a big buy. We brought in a couple of £5 million players that didn't work out in Barkas and Ayeti. But how likely is it really in the great scheme of things and with this landscape? I mean, we still seem to be buying players in for the £4.5 million kind of bracket, and Kyogo and Starfelt. And then, Giacomakis, apparently it's a £2.5 million deal. So are those days gone?
I think it's down to how much we trust the manager, really.
Yeah.
It's going to be, if the manager can build the trust and show they can develop players and sell them on, it then becomes easier to risk that type of money. But it's interesting, kind of Eddie leads on for Hendry, because we had a buyout clause in Eddie's deal. PSG couldn't just take him back if we operated a buyout clause. And I think that's the same with Hendry. We couldn't just take him back into the fold. There was a buyout clause in that deal. And they decided to activate it. And at the time he signed, I think everybody was happy for Hendry to go on loan for a season. There was no one saying, listen, you better keep that boy. He's going to be a player. It just wasn't working for him at Celtic. And after, obviously, they activate the buyout, it's then down to Jack Hendry to decide if he wants to go to them or if he wants to stay at Celtic. So, and I could see maybe why, he definitely had happier times there on the football field than he had at Celtic. So you could see why he wanted his move.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And bearing in mind, Lawrence, this was after that horrific knee injury that he got over in Australia. So he's maybe just looking for the right fit, and he found it. And, it's horrible to get a knockback from anybody in football, but that's what it feels like at the moment from Jack Hendry.
Yeah, totally. And listen, it's understandable why he do it, though. He's maybe looking and going, well, didn't really work for me. Whether he thought he was going to support the development, who knows? Didn't work for me. He couldn't get him out the door quick enough on loan. And now I'm sure a bit of form, he's want me back. So it's understandable. And listen, if he gets a 10 million move, I'm sure he's going to go into bigger wages, isn't he? I don't think we were going to all of a sudden push the boat out of his wages if he came back. But who knows if Ange would even have fancied him as a player. I think he's still... Is he in it? I don't think he's the answer. I don't think he's the dominant centre-half we're looking for. Just now, if Hendry was in our squad, if he had decided to stay, I would say they're still looking for another centre-half.
Yeah. Absolutely.
He's a bit like Chris Julian and kind of his style of play and stuff, so I'm kind of going, well, that's not really what we need. We need somebody a bit more dominant. But,
Yeah, I think we do.
Good luck to him. He's obviously been over there. He's put the application in. He's made a success of it.
I know, a success story of someone who's gone out on loan and found a club that fits his needs. Will McMillan makes the point. Griffiths will have to play through the booze everywhere he goes in Scotland. That was the one thing that surprised me, I've got to say. When we were talking about Lee Griffiths, I thought he needs to get out of Scotland. He needs to get out of this bubble, start afresh in more ways than just in football. But he's in Dundee. So, you know, I do get Will's point. I think he will get a lot of stick wherever he goes. And the Silver Fox reckons that we should have tried to keep Ryan Christie. That takes us on to the question of Christie. So, Ryan Christie, we all know the career in terms of Celtic. We sign him as one of the most promising young footballers in Scottish football. He comes in, he's loaned directly back to Inverness Cali Thistle. Doesn't really get going when he comes back to Celtic, so he's loaned out to Aberdeen. And very much like the Jack Hendry deal, nobody would have had any quibbles if, you know, Christie's Aberdeen loan deal turned into a permanent one back then. You know, I don't think anyone was you know, just basically one of the players like Scott Allen. You bring him in, he's a young potential future player for Celtic, and it doesn't work out. But he comes back to the Celtic side, and he comes in for that game at Murrayfield, and he then, you know, it's quite clear that he's worked in terms of his own physical strength. You know, he developed massively physically and as a player, Kevin. And he went on a run of form where he was one of our best players. And I think that the one story I keep going back to, because you can't forget some of the important goals that he scored, you know, in cup finals, for example, even just last season. And the story I always go back to, when he was at the kind of peak of his form for Celtic, I spoke to an Inverness Caledonian Thistle official who had been speaking to Peter Lawwell about whether or not there was a likelihood that Ryan Christie would be leaving the club. And he was interested because Inverness Cali had a 15% sell-on the transfer fee. And he was trying to figure out how much Ryan Christie would cost in the market. And I was trying to be pretty kind of sensible about it. And I think I said something along the lines of 12.5 million quid or whatever. And if you were doing really well, maybe push up to 15. And this guy, who's an official at a football club in Scotland, was like, no. They'll get more than that for him. You know, and that was back then. So how disappointing is it now? Fast forward, yeah, he had a poor season last season. Show me a Celtic player who didn't. That we're going to be losing him and the contracts ran down. Or do you say, you know what, we're going to lose him in January for nothing, so take the couple of million quid and run? I just think he is the player that I think could flourish under Ange had he stayed at Celtic, but it's looking unlikely. What's your thoughts, Kev?
It's really disappointing, I think, that he's leaving. Out of the two that's going to go today, him and Edward, Christie's the one I think that's most suited to Ange's style of play. Mm-hmm. Putting him either in the midfield alongside McGregor and Turnbull, or having him on one of the wide rolls out up front, like, his style is just perfectly suited to the way Ange wants to play the game. And you know that when Christie's on form, he's one of the top players in Scotland. You say the amount of big games that he's scored goals in cup finals, semi-finals. He'll be a big miss to us, I think. And it's massively disappointing that we're going to lose him for, you say, 1 million, 2 million, when, you know, if you'd sold him last season, you're going to get 10 times that maybe. If you tie him down on a longer term contract just now, you can sell him for 10 times that, or you can keep him in the team, you keep him happy, and we're a stronger team for having him. So for me, he'll be a big loss. His energy will be a big loss to that midfield.
You know, there's a lot of comments going through. I'd get that he blew hot and cold, absolutely, and none more so rather than last season. And I also don't think it was his best performance at the weekend. Some have suggested that he's not turned up against Rangers yet. Absolutely take all of that into account. I think what we've seen enough of this season is that Ange can get a tune out of him. You know, he does seem to fit Ange's style. I think the biggest error, and he's admitted it himself, Christie should have been playing out left at the weekend, 100%. You know, he's played so well out there. Kyogo should have been through the middle. But it's almost as if we've kind of set up to accommodate Edouard, and it didn't work out, and that's just the way it is, and that's why we've not won the game. Christie's moved just for the money. A lot of players, absolutely, they will do that. But I think also, though, when he was at the top of his form, when he had a fair length of time left on his contract, and when I spoke to the guy who was interested in the sell-on fee, it's at that point that you look at the player and you say, well, you know what, you're not one of the best paid players at the club, because we know that he's not. And it's at that point that you give him a new deal. So again, a wee bit of complacency, maybe another legacy issue. The Jack Hendry thing's a legacy issue. There's nothing that the CEO could really do about that coming in. You can't really do much about the Ryan Christie thing unless the manager convinces him to stay. Lawrence, he's going to be a big loss, though, I think, judging by his form so far this season.
Listen, definitely, but as far as I know, Christie's had a number of offers to put to him. If a player doesn't want to sign, you can't force him. But what really worries me is about letting him go for $1 million or $2 million just now. We're so short of players, and he's one of our informed players. He's making so much happen for us. I think it's really short-sighted. We should be going, just take that hit, let him go for nothing. January transfer window. We need his performances between now and Christmas, because we are so short on the left-hand side. Portuguese boy comes in. We already needed cover. It's just a replacement. We don't know how good he's going to be. I would have kept Christie and just said, look, keep your $1 million, your $2 million, whatever. We're going to keep him to January transfer window. And yeah, he might get himself a better move, because he is actually playing, he's played a lot better this season than he did last season. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's something Ryan should have considered. If I stay here and play another 4 or 5 months like this, what clubs are going to be interested in me then?
Yeah.
I don't think that, those are definite stepping stone clubs for Christie, aren't they, that he's been linked with. So
we shall see, because that's the big test. There's a lot of players gone down there, and I think being shocked at the physicality of the game, standard of the game, and they might not get a better standard. However, it will be an interesting ACSOM broadcast to look back in a year's time to where all these guys are now and how much money's been spent on them. Facebook user comes in. Don't know which one it is yet, because your face isn't showing. I've just woke up and that's no Kev. Well, I can assure you it is Kev. It's maybe not the Kev you were expecting, but it is Kevin McCluskey. Kevin McCluskey, a Celtic fan from from the central Scotland area, but he is definitely our Hungarian football expert and correspondent. And we thought it was about time he came back on, Kevin. We had a wee chat at the beginning of the show, but we'll certainly end up by doing a deep dive into Ferencváros. It's been a wee while since we saw them up close and personal. That was one of the first signs for a lot of people. I say this for a lot of people last season, that we had big issues, big problems with things like defending, and big issues with goalkeeping and being able to get the job done. That was the game where we started without a recognised striker up front, etc. A lot of Celtic fans knew there were issues before then, absolutely, and credit to you for spotting it. But a lot of Celtic supporters last season were looking at that Champions League result and thinking, we should have beat that side. But we spoke to you that week, Kevin, and you give us a lowdown of Ferencváros. Who are we going to have to look out for when the clubs meet? And it's the 30th of September, the first leg at Celtic Park. Interestingly enough, at 3:30 in the afternoon. So who are we looking out for this time round?
They've made a few changes since the last time we played them. So there's a few new faces to look out for. One of the biggest changes, though, is that Rebrov's no longer the manager. So he left in the summer. He's been replaced by a guy called Peter Stöger, who was a former coach of Borussia Dortmund and also Austria Vienna. His appointment in the summer was not well received by the fans, because Ferencváros has got a fan link with Rapid Vienna. So to bring in a guy from Austria Vienna didn't go down very well. But he's come in and he's kind of changed the style of play a little bit. So where Rebrov was a 4-3-3, he's now gone 4-2-3-1. And he's a lot more offensive minded than Rebrov was. Kind of always felt with his teams it was about getting the win, getting the result. Whereas Stoger's a bit more attack minded. They're certainly more open at the back, but going forward they've got a lot of pace and a lot of strength up there. So I think probably the players that we're going to have to look out for, you've obviously got Tokmak, who scored the goal at Celtic Park last season. And one of the new signings in the summer, a guy called Ryan May, He's a centre forward they brought in from Limassol for about €750,000. He plays at kind of centre forward and outside right position. Got a couple of goals at the weekend. Very strong, pacey, plays off the shoulder of the last defender. A little bit like Kyogo, I guess, in that style, and kind of very dangerous in front of goal. So I think probably that's your two key men. Actually, May only got the one at the weekend. It was Mac who scored two. Sorry, correct myself. He plays off the left of the front three. He's a guy that came in last season. He's had a year to settle in. The front three are all kind of very similar. They're interchangeable, move around very well, pulling defenders out of position. So the front three, Tokmak, Mac, and May are definitely the three to look out for.
Will you come back onto the ACSOM Bulletin before the game? We'll have another wee chat with you, see how you are getting on.
Yes, I'll definitely come back on before, if you'll have me.
Good man. Lawrence, always a pleasure, even when you've scrolled graffiti on your whiteboard before you came onto the broadcast and it kept you late. Sorry for any connection problems. A few wee gremlins trying to take us off air, I think. But thank you all for the 1,500 of you that tuned in live there. And for everybody who is going to be watching this non-live after the event on YouTube, etc. If you're not already subscribing, please do so. Today's the last day you can win the Fratelli's Platinum Disc, which is just over here, over my shoulder. This was presented to John Fratelli. That was presented to John Fratelli for 600,000 sales of Costello music. So yes, if you want to win that, get subscribing on the YouTube channel. We give away prizes every month, sometimes every week. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you to Kevin McCluskey and to Lawrence Conley for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.